Warden of a prison goes in one day and says to the folks, the inmates, I'm in a really good mood. I'm going to let one of you go today. I just need to figure out who's worthy. So he goes to the first inmate, says, tell me about yourself. Guy says, well, Warden, I'm an innocent man. I was dating the police chief's daughter. I was framed. They planted evidence. Okay, he goes to the next guy. He said, well, my mother was a bad person. I was raised in dire circumstances. How would I have turned out better? It really wasn't my fault. And each one down the line explains why they're innocent or not responsible. I guess to a guy in the back corner. He says to the guy in the back corner, what's your story? Guy looks at him and says, well, Warden, I did it. He said, I'm guilty. I admit it. It was a bad thing. I feel bad about it. I didn't think it would turn out this way, but it's what happened. I'm serving my time. I'm not complaining, and I'm not asking you to let me go. Warden stops for a minute, turns to all the other inmates and said, this man's going to be released today. Of course, they go nuts. They're like, why him? He just said he was guilty. He said, all right, well, calm down. You've all told me that you're innocent. I don't want to corrupt you by having a guilty man in your midst. So that's a lead-in because responsibility isn't necessarily about always doing things right. It's about when something happens, being accountable, taking the proper steps, and making sure that you fix it. We're about to hear from Ben Pratt, who is Senior Vice President at Mosaic Group. Now, Mosaic Group had some headlines earlier this year about a problem that they encountered with, some groundwater contamination in the state of Florida. And it involved technology that was approved through them and DEP, Florida DEP and whatever, but it failed, and that happens, okay? I will say that Mosaic Group immediately stepped up, set up a $2 billion reserve for remuneration and remediation, okay? So Mosaic Group, you want to try to be perfect. You take all the steps. Sometimes you're not. That's why we don't call this the Corporate Perfection Association, okay? We all have our moments, and in every one of your companies, somewhere at the fringes of your empire, someone's doing something wrong. But when that wrong thing happens, take responsibility and fix it. That's one of the things I actually respect the fact that they're going to come out and talk about best practices, respect the fact that they stepped up as soon as there was a problem. Now, Ben Pratt is Vice President, as I said, for Public Affairs at Mosaic. They are the largest manufacturer of phosphates. Now, you could say, well, this potential for environmental damage isn't worth it, but if we stopped phosphate production, it is estimated that 20% of the world's population would starve to death in 5 years. Is anyone willing to make that trade-off? I don't think so. So they make phosphate and potash fertilizers. He leads their internal executive investor media and crisis communications, as well as the company's community investment activities and sustainability reporting. Prior to joining Mosaic in 2012, he was a senior vice president for corporate communications at Ameriprise Financial. Prior to that, he also worked for a variety of communications and investor relations capacities for PNC Group in Pittsburgh and at Lehman Brothers. I guess you learned crisis communications at Lehman's. That was probably baptism by fire, man. He is a graduate of Duke University. He lives in Deep Haven, Minnesota. So welcome, Ben Pratt, Mosaic Group.
Thanks, Elliot. I think, anyway. Yeah, I'm playing the convict in this scenario. A quick story about the settlement Elliot referred to. We reached a settlement under the EPA's RCRA guidelines, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. When we were negotiating the final details of that settlement and we had agreed to how to communicate about it, we thought we had an $800 million settlement that was going to require $800 million of our cash. Next day, the government put out its news release and said we had a $2 billion settlement. which was shocking. You know, the extra 1.2 is real money. And so we got to reading the settlement more closely and thought we probably didn't really have a settlement if that was the delta. Turned out the government was counting what the money will be worth after it sits in escrow for 25 years when they think that they'll have access to it. So $2 billion settlement was a little misleading. It's about $800 million of actual cash we spent, still a lot of money. But it was an interesting lesson in how you deal with the federal government on settlements like that. So also, thanks for doing sort of half of my presentation, Elliot, but I'll try to I'll try to talk about other things. Innovation, you might ask why we're talking about innovation at a corporate responsibility meeting. To us, innovation and sustainability and corporate responsibility are very closely intertwined things. We think about sustainability in a much broader context than environmental sustainability. We think about the actual meaning of the word, the ability to sustain a business. And if we have to innovate to be able to be sustainable, and we have to be sustainable if we want to be responsible. So I'm going to talk about what we do and how we are an innovative company. First, Elliot kind of mentioned this, stole my thunder a little bit, but you know, when I go to a cocktail party and I don't know people and I introduce myself and say I work for a fertilizer company, they tend to kind of drift away fast. It doesn't sound very interesting. If I get one more line, though, they tend to stick around, which is, but you know, half of the world's food production is attributable to fertilizer. Without fertilizer, we'd have a lot fewer people on the planet. So that is the good side of what we do. I like the fact that what we make is absolutely necessary. Making it is resource intensive, and it's an asset intensive, capital intensive process. We make about 25 million tons of potash and phosphate fertilizers. Potassium and phosphorus are two of the three nutrients that every plant needs. We don't make nitrogen. I'm not just trying to disavow apparently the conversation from the earlier panel today. We make potash and phosphates. So you might think if you're in the ag business, around the ag business, ag is driven very largely by technological innovation. It might sound a little odd to people who aren't familiar with ag, but it is. And fertilizer has not been. Nobody's developed a new or really innovative fertilizer product in a very long time. We talk about big innovation in fertilizer. We talk about the Haber-Bosch process, which was discovered in 1912. So the last major product innovation happened when they figured out how to grab nitrogen out of the air and turn it into fertilizer. So this is, you know, our processes have not changed a lot over many years. And it's a big, long supply chain. Let me just describe very briefly how we make fertilizers. We mine resources. We mine potash ore very deep in the earth in central Canada, in Saskatchewan. And we mine phosphate ore in central Florida. We own about 350,000 acres of central Florida and an area to the east of Tampa. And we strip mine phosphate ore there. We ship it up to our facilities to make it into fertilizer. In the case of phosphate, it has to be made water soluble, which requires a chemical process. Potash can be put straight on the farm field if you just cut it up into the right sizes. Then we ship it all over the world, and we sell these 25 million tons of fertilizer to about 40 countries around the world, primary markets in Brazil, China, India, and North America. And then the product is used, and farmers. I think I've seen this picture several thousand times, and I need some new farmers in my life. But so there has not been a whole lot of innovation in fertilizer. The process, however, in fertilizer products, but innovation is driving our company and will drive us in the future. Let me talk about mining first. And I know we're going to hear some more about copper mining for the next presentation, but mining has not always been a font of innovation either. This thing is a phosphate drag line. The bucket on the end there is big enough to hold two short school buses, and the boom is over 300 feet long. So you can kind of just get a sense of the scale. It's pretty hard to really understand how big these things are until you stand beside them. We've been using machines just like this. Our predecessors have, maybe slightly smaller versions, for a very long time. So not a lot has changed in that process. But we're getting much better at ore recovery, which is really important. Phosphorus is a non-renewable resource. There's plenty of it in the world. It's just going to get more expensive to get to it. Years ago, we would mine and have ore recovery rates of something like 70%, and we're in the mid-90s now. So that's a really valuable cost savings for the company. It's good for revenue, but it's also good for the resource. You can only mine these lands once, and then we put them back the way we found them. So I'll talk about that in a minute, right now, in fact. Reclamation is central to what we do in Central Florida. We have to return every acre of land we mine exactly to almost exactly the way it was. One little anecdote, we're required to put every acre of land back to within 6 inches of its original height, its original sea level elevation. We take out about 12 feet of stuff when we mine. And so the way we do that is we dig more lakes, and we use the fill from the lakes to replenish the land. And so reclamation, which is required by federal statute, is a very good thing for Florida. It's about a 10-year process from the first shovel in the ground until the land is fully restored for use by habitat and people. And keep in mind, this part of Florida, for a lot of East Coasters, I don't think you think of Central Florida at all. And if you do, you don't. Sorry to my colleague who's here from Central Florida. It's very rural, right? Florida is an agricultural powerhouse. It's one of the most important agricultural states in the country, and a lot of people don't realize that. And a lot of the land that we're mining isn't. There are people who haven't set foot on a lot of this land in a very long time. It's in the middle of nowhere. Another really interesting idea we had. I hear rumors that Ali's about to pitch me to have a commit form here in the future at Streamsong. We built a world-class golf resort. We're a fertilizer company. That's not a normal thing to do. It's not always a thing your shareholders are predisposed to like, right? But the picture on the right side of the screen is of Streamsong, which has 2 world-class golf courses, soon to be a 3rd, and a full-fledged resort. Fishing, skeet shooting, all that stuff. It was built on land that was mined and finished mining in the early 70s before the reclamation statutes existed. So it's a very unusual landscape. It's got all these dunes and mine cuts where there's now water. And the vision that the guy who's our CFO now had at the time was pretty remarkable. You're standing on this scrub that looks like the moon, and it's full of alligators and wild boar, right? It doesn't seem like the most hospitable place to put a golf resort. But we realized that we could demonstrate to all of our constituents in Florida the use that could be made of this kind of land. And so what we ended up creating is this spectacular place that employs hundreds of people in a very rural place without a lot of economic opportunity. And it provides a pretty substantial tax base, a hotel bed tax base, as well as property tax. So a very unusual project for a mining company or a fertilizer company to do, but it's there. And it's a little like Brigadoon. If you ever go out there, you drive along and you don't think you're ever going to get anywhere, trust me. But you do, and you arrive at this beautiful resort, and we'd love to have you. The manufacturing process, I'm talking about the manufacturing for phosphates. We used to draw down a lot of energy from the municipal grid, and we realized that we could make our own. And so we started cogeneration of electricity by gathering waste heat from the process of making phosphate fertilizer, turning it into steam and electricity. So we actually make enough electricity in Florida to meet all of our needs now and to sell some back to the local grid when they want it. They don't always want it, but when they do, we sell it to them. So that's a classic example to me of really good CSR work. It's great cost reduction for the company, right? Not having to buy all that electricity. It's also self-sufficiency for us and for the neighbors around us. We're not drawing down. We're not straining their electricity grids all the time, as we would be with the pretty massive quantities of energy we require to run the facilities there. So something we're really proud of. And also, this is the kind of innovation project that requires really significant upfront commitment. It's a big, big investment. There's a lot of capital involved in building the machinery to co-generate all this electricity. You have to, the models, you can look at the models and see that you're going to save money down the line, but you have to be willing to invest the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars now to get there. And that's a commitment that we've made, and it has worked out extremely well for us. Now I'll pause here for a minute. This was sort of part of what Elliot talked about, and we have an incident that we've all been dealing with for about a month and a half now. This is a picture of one of our phosphate processing facilities called New Wales in the middle of Florida. That big hill behind it is a pile of phosphogypsum, which is a byproduct of our process. It looks essentially like a landfill, right? But in the last month and a half, and it's important for you to know that we put processed water that we use in the manufacturing process on top of the phosphogypsum stacks to store them. About a couple months ago, we realized that one area of one of these gypsum stacks had developed a sinkhole. So it was literally losing hundreds of millions of gallons of contaminated water into the Floridan aquifer, which is the primary source of drinking water for the residents of Florida. That does sound like a CSR challenge, doesn't it? So when you go to the neighbors and tell them that there's a lot of contaminated water in their aquifer, they're not very happy to start with. The facts are on our side. Aquifers don't move much. Aquifers are not rivers. They sit there. Our facility is huge, and we've got the important thing to demonstrate our CR commitment. We have collection wells all the way around the property. We have the ability to collect all that water before it ever gets off site, pump it back out, and never have any impact on anybody's drinking water. So Elliot made the point that sometimes things happen. This wasn't anything that we necessarily did wrong. These are very highly engineered systems, these gyp stacks as we call them. But sometimes, Florida has sinkholes and these things develop. But you have to, first you have to have the fail-safes to help you get around the problem after it happens. And then you have to have the ability, as Elliot said, to go tell people it happened and apologize and tell them how you're going to fix it. And that's what we've done. Obviously, if you lived close to this facility, not very many people do, you'd be concerned about your drinking water. So we've spent the last 6 weeks testing people's wells at their request every time. So, this is a big process to create fertilizer. It's got a lot of resource use and some waste associated with it. It's absolutely necessary product. Phosphate is required for people to live and for plants to grow. So we need to make it, but we need to make it responsibly. And when things go wrong, we need to own up to it and fix it. So that's what we've done. On to safety. Our CEO always says he's never seen a good manufacturing organization that has a bad safety record. And he's never seen almost every bad manufacturing organization he's seen has a bad safety record. And safety is a classic example to me of a place where innovation is really small. You can't leave safety up to 6 people sitting in an ivory tower trying to figure out how to make employees safer. It's got to be every employee every day, and it's got to be part of the culture. We have 9,000 employees around the world. Vast majority of them are hourly and unionized. And so there's a special challenge that goes with that to try to motivate them to improve the systems that are required. 2015, last year, we had our best safety performance ever. It was our 4th straight year of best safety performance ever. I think we're on track for another record in 2016. But these are people who are operating big, heavy machinery every day, and any injury is too many. So we rely on every person, maintenance people, engineers, whoever's out there managing our equipment to improve the safety of everyone. Oops, skipped one. Our supply chain is big and long. We have a lot of need for raw materials to make phosphate fertilizers in particular, and we have a long delivery chain on the other end. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how to make the supply chain more efficient. This is one example. We started shipping materials around in Florida again with compressed natural gas trucks, saving a lot of emissions. And supply chain is a place where we are starting to put pressure on vendors and suppliers to adhere to standards, but it's to be frank, it's the next frontier for us. It's a place where ag and our business specifically have been a little behind. Product innovation, I mentioned at the start, there hasn't been a real product innovation in fertilizer in a long time. Well, we have one premium product that's been successful. There are a lot of barriers to good innovation in our business. It takes a long time to demonstrate. First, you have to figure out how to make a better product. Then you have to demonstrate if it works for farmers. Then you have to build a plant to make it. And if you want to build something at scale, we'll have to spend $1 billion or more to build a plant. Then you have to build a market for it, and then you have to convince farmers to change, which is the hardest thing of all. Farmers most people don't like change. I heard that said earlier this morning, but many farmers, and in particular around the row crop region of the Midwest, are slow to change. So, all those barriers aside, I don't think that's a good excuse for why there's been very little product innovation in fertilizers. You got to try, and we are trying. We have one product that has built a big market, and you can see what it does. I apologize for the mathy nature of this slide, but as plant populations go up on per acre, farmers can get significant benefit by using this enhanced fertilizer product. It's just phosphorus that also has zinc or other micronutrients built in. It's one little granule. They're melded together, makes it more available to the plant. And I should mention that the technology that you hear so much about in agriculture, GMOs and other seed technologies, are the thing that have made these plant populations possible. The plant population at 38,000 plants per acre would have been maybe half of that 15 or 20 years ago. And why that matters is because, as our last speaker mentioned, it's a commodities business. You don't want to be beholden to the commodities pricing swings any more than you have to be. So farmers are motivated to generate as much revenue per acre as they can. So they want their yields to be as high as they can. So you can see if with using a premium product and having a very well planted field, they can generate 15 bushels of corn per acre more than they would using another. That right now plays out to about $50 of revenue per acre, with corn trading in the $3 plus range. That's a low price for corn at the moment. But and if you have a 2,000 acre corn farm, that's a lot of extra revenue. That more than offsets the extra cost of the product. So this is an area though where we are pushing really hard to figure out how to bring better product innovation to market. Both for yield, our whole industry has been focused just on yield forever. And we think it's time that we also focus on environmental impact. And we are working on that. We're working on fertilizers that will have less environmental impact. Costs are not very exciting, right? You don't think of cost as innovation, and you don't think of it as sustainability. It absolutely is sustainability to us. If we are in a commodities business, as we're learning right now, it's pretty painful out there for us right now. The commodities business is struggling. 4 years ago, we were selling potash for $500 a ton. Today, we're selling it for $170. We make 12 million tons of it. You can do the math. It's a lot of money. So what that means is you've got to be the low-cost producer in the competitor field in order to survive. So how is cost innovative? Well, if you want to take out $575 million of cost, you can start with the easy things, right? We shut a couple high-cost mines. That's pretty easy. But after that, it gets hard, and you have to find the dollars somewhere else. So we challenge everybody around the place to find ways to cut costs, large and small. And we're getting there. We're almost to this goal of $575 million of expense savings. And when we get there, as the commodity cycle hopefully improves at some point, we'll be in great position. We're not stopping. We've got sustainability targets that we released last year to reduce water and energy use and greenhouse gas emissions by 10% per product ton. Those don't seem like really big numbers, but we were doing well on these measures already. We've reported them for a long time, and we are. I think we've made a huge amount of progress. I mentioned the cogeneration of electricity. We also recycle almost all the water we use in the phosphate operations. So while it's a water intensive, it is an energy intensive process. We're working our way there, and we feel good about our progress in this first year since we released our targets. And think we will reach the goals by 2020. Finally, I mentioned employees. When you've got a very diverse and sort of globally spread out workforce, asking them to be innovative and really get behind that can be hard. It's hard to ingrain that in the culture, especially when so many of your employees are unionized and are coming to work essentially for the paycheck, which is great. So we've asked employees to innovate on process, on cost, on everything else that they can see. And it's worked out really well for us because almost all the innovative ideas that we've actually implemented over the past several years to improve efficiency, essentially, have come from individual employees who are out there watching what goes on when they're trying to make fertilizer every day. So I'll circle back to where I started. Why is this so important? We need a lot more food. Well, we need a lot of food, regardless. We heard in the first panel this morning that there's a lot of food that goes to waste. That's absolutely true. We could argue about where the food needs to come from. But if the population is going to reach over 9 billion people in 30 years, we need to produce a whole lot more food in this world, and we need to do it on essentially the same amount of land that's being farmed now. There's not a whole lot of appetite to deforest more land to bring it into agricultural production. That's a good thing. And there's not a whole lot of fallow land lying sitting around right now that could be brought into production. So there will be a growing gap if we can't help farmers be ever more productive to meet demand. And again, there's lots of ways to address this, to help address this problem. But essentially, this is why fertilizer matters. This is what our story is about. It's about helping farmers around the world close that gap. And we're going to push innovation every step of the way to do that. So with that, I have a few minutes. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to talk about sinkholes or anything else you want to talk about.
How did your company get its name?
That's a good question. It's a really dumb corporate name, isn't it? We've been a public company for 11 years, spun out of Cargill. It was Cargill Fertilizer, and another fertilizer company that was essentially bankrupt, put together and made a public company. So when we went public, there was the thought that we were a sort of collection of a bunch of different companies mashed together. So that's partly where the Mosaic thing came from. And then our logo, you can see the farm fields. I don't have a logo on this page. Oh well. But it's sort of what the farm fields look like from above when you're flying over. Looks sort of like a mosaic. But if you're the branding and storytelling guy, it's really hard because every multicultural organization in the world is called Mosaic. There's a Mosaic church in most towns. If you Google Mosaic logo, we get to ours on about the 4th page. And we're a Fortune 300 company with, so it's been difficult. The only one I like less, well, I shouldn't say it's kind of harsh for our people. There's an energy company in North Dakota that's an ethanol company that recently rebranded itself as Poet Energy. I like that less. What else? Yes.
You might have covered this, without talking about people such anything, but is Mosaic doing anything in biotech to make your fertilizers less toxic for the environment?
Well, we're not doing anything in biotech to make fertilizers less toxic for the environment. So the potash that we make isn't toxic, right? Potash has no environmental impact. Phosphates, because it's got a nitrogen component, when it runs off and meets the water, it causes problems. And it's not really in our skill set to do the biotech work. We're relying on others to do that. What we're doing instead is spending an awful lot of time, and I'm looking at folks in my team here who are spending a lot of their time trying to help farmers keep fertilizer on the field. And that's the secret to less environmental impact is keeping more of it on the field. It's in everyone's interest, right? No farmer wants to buy fertilizer and then watch it run off into a stream. But so we're doing a lot of research to help farmers be more efficient with their use of fertilizers.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't organic produce not having used these kinds of fertilizers?
Yeah, phosphate fertilizer is not organic.
That's what I
No.
was driving at. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Miki Noguchi, Franklin Street Policy Group. Elliot touched on it earlier that the response to the sinkhole has been, great, like really taking responsibility for what happened. So I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the processes that you put in place, stakeholder engagement, all of the work that you did before the crisis happened that enabled you to respond in the way that Mosaic has been able to respond and then, recover.
That's a long story. We have been, so just a very brief bit of history. The phosphate industry in Florida, I'll get the numbers wrong, but say 20 years ago, there were probably 20 phosphate companies operating in Florida. We're the only one now. A lot of them went out of business in an earlier cycle. We consolidated a bunch of them. There's one other company with one small mine in the northern part of the state. So we realized that, and a lot of those companies had caused environmental problems at various times in the past. So the industry's reputation really was not very good 10 years ago. So we set out, and actually I think the industry was largely to blame for that. They really didn't do any stakeholder engagement for a long period of time. They just kind of pretended it wasn't a problem. We own the land, so we think we have the right to produce the resource from it. That's clearly not true. We have to earn our license to operate even if you own the land. You've got to get permits for everything we do. So we first started out by trying to improve the image of Florida phosphate generally, which we did through advertising and media work and then government relations work. And this is very local government work. We're not talking about even state level government work. We're talking about trying to make it okay for county commissioners in Polk County or Hardy County, Florida, to side with us when we go to ask for a permit. Make it politically okay for them. Make them electable if they vote for us. And that took a lot of time. And really what it took was a lot of embracing of your foes, right? We had a mine that was shut down by injunction by the Sierra Club at one point. And we realized the reason that happened, we got through the process and reopened the mine, realized the reason that happened was because we didn't have a relationship with them. We hadn't, we'd always thought Sierra Club hates us, we'll just not talk to them. We flipped that around and said, look, we're going to talk to everybody and we're going to be honest about it. We're not going to greenwash or whitewash our stories. We're going to tell you exactly what we're doing. And there are a lot of those groups that still don't like the mining process. I get that. It's big, it's ugly, it's dusty. But if you understand the importance of our product and the economic impact that we have on the area, we can usually reach some kind of compromise with people. So the stakeholder engagement has been vast and very, very targeted in one sense, and then also very sort of big across that whole region of Florida. No less true in Canada, where we don't have much environmental impact because the mines are 4,000 feet down. But it's the people's resource in Canada. We don't own it, so we have to earn our right to mine that too. So we do a lot of that kind of work there. It's different. We have our name on a stadium in Saskatchewan. We wouldn't necessarily do that in Florida, but there's a wide range of things. And I think the lesson for us has been to be honest. We learned it a long time ago. We learned it long before I got there. But it's don't hide, don't make stuff up, don't greenwash it. Tell it like it is, and that's worked well for us. Any other questions?
When you talk about the gap there between current food production and what is needed, do you partner or talk to seed companies or other people so your fertilizer and their seeds are working together to create the biggest output?
That's why I said fertilizer industry so far behind in product innovation. We have we don't work very closely. We work with seed companies, primarily through retailers. We sell our products to agricultural retailers. We don't sell it straight to farmers. And so they're selling all those things. They're selling seed chemicals and fertilizers. So we kind of do it at that level, but we have not done a good job of trying to figure out how to match new fertilizer products to very high-tech seeds. That's where our business is going, to where it really needs to go more quickly. And again, it's an old industry mindset. It's a commodity business. We've been making this stuff the same way for a really long time. It's worked, and it continues to work, and it would be really expensive to change. But that's the mindset we have to get around and get past.
I have a question on the supply. You mentioned that there's unlimited supply, but it's harder to get to. What is your plan for the future, and where do you see the industry going with this new rising manufacturing cost or
Yeah.
production cost, and being able to adjust to the commodity pricing that you're
Yeah, to be honest, the problem is more for us than it is for some of our competitors. There are only about 5 significant phosphate companies in the world. Potash is the potash seam that we're currently mining has about 500 years worth of potash in it, we think. So that's probably good. And the phosphate, the area in Central Florida that we mine is, we've been telling people it has about 40 years of resource left in it, and we've been telling them that for probably 20 years because the technology keeps getting better, but it will run out. There are vast resources of phosphates that other companies in other countries have access to, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and they are mining them, and they're our competitors. China also does that. And so for us, the bigger challenge is to make sure that our company still has access to the rock. And what we're doing, we've got a joint venture for a project in Saudi Arabia. We own part of a mine in Peru, so we're just trying to make sure we have access to the rock we need. And if we didn't have access to rock outside of Florida 30, 40 years from now, we would be having to develop these new technologies to mine phosphate in more expensive places. So that's why we're being proactive and looking to other places around the world to find rock. The price decrease? No, he asked if the move to organic farming has affected prices for our products. It doesn't seem so. Organics, relative to production agriculture, organics are still a relatively small part of the pie. And you can certainly make the case to use potash fertilizers. That was the price I mentioned. They are essentially organic. There's nothing, we don't do anything to them to make them inorganic. So I think the bigger issue is just the commodities complex in general. Prices are low everywhere in commodities right now. So I don't know. I'm not sure that anybody's studied if there's a nominal impact. There could be, but it seems nominal at most. Well, thank you very much.